The goal of this video is to offer you a bunch of comparisons between physical and chemical properties, as well as physical and chemical changes, so you can be able to present it with a situation and know what category that fits into. All right, so let me provide you with an example of physical and chemical properties to start with. When we're looking at our physical properties here versus our chemical, physical properties will be observed without changing the composition. There's no change in molecular structure. The density and boiling points and viscosity would be examples of those. And we can measure via physical tests, for example, a thermometer. And the relevance to states, well, it varies by state. Viscosity in liquids would be one example. An example, again, of physical would be melting point of water. That's just a great example of physical properties. Now, chemical properties observed during chemical reactions, as the name implies. It involves the forming of new substances. It could be flammability, reactivity. It does require chemical interactions, such as burning, and it can consist across states of a substance. We see one example I gave you is the oxidation or rusting of a bolt or a nail. Now, looking at the physical and chemical changes, starting again with the physical, well, that's a change in form of shape, size, or state. It does, the chemical composition does remain the same when we're talking even during a physical change. An example of this would be like melting of water, cutting of paper. It's usually reversible, so you can kind of use that as a gauge, and requires minimal or sometimes no energy to change. Change in appearance, state, or texture would be signs of this, as well as no breaking or forming of chemical bonds on a molecular scale. Versus chemical changes, where we see splitting wood would be an example of our physical change. Now, a chemical change would be burning that wood, because that alters the chemical composition of a new substance. It changes and forms new substances. Rusting of iron, cooking of eggs, burning of wood. As a result, these are usually irreversible. Often involves energy release or absorption of light or heat. Can produce a new color, odor, or gas, or even a precipitate, because you are breaking and or reforming chemical bonds. So let's apply this to a situation. So if we look at burning this candle here, would this be an example of a physical or a chemical change? So you can kind of think about what's going on here. Yes, we've got a flame. Yes, we've got some wax. We've got a wick. We've got some heat. What's kind of going on here? So take a guess. And if you said chemical change, well, you kind of all right, looking at the combustion of the chemicals wax, it's a hydrocarbon. With oxygen and air, it's producing new substances such as carbon dioxide and water vapor, and even sometimes soot. You might see a little burning, a little kind of carbon kind of coming off there. This process involves the breaking and forming of chemical bonds, making a chemical change. The release of heat and light during the burning is a key indicator of a chemical change. You can see this being very warm here, taking solid wax, heating it up, making that liquid wax through that chemical combustion that occurs. However, if you were to say a physical change, you could also make the argument for this. This would only be true if you're looking at the melting of the wax near the flame. This would be a physical change, because as our wax, solid, goes into a liquid, there's not really a change in the composition. And we could see that when we kind of cool that down, when it spills over and cools back down, it goes right back to the solid form of wax that it was before. This molten wax is drawn up the wick to fuel the flame, but the wax itself remains chemically the same during the phase change. So keep in mind that you have to have a good idea of a physical and chemical change. When you're presented with a situation, be able to support the argument that you're making for defining a particular observation or reaction as chemical or physical.